Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and one of the additions that a lot of people have been looking forward to GameMaker, possibly more than anything else in the last few months, has been that of a particle editor that's built into the IDE. And that first arrived about a month ago in the February 2023 betas to GameMaker, and it should be hitting the monthly version about when this video goes up. As of my recording this, that hasn't happened yet, but likely the Friday before this
Hey,
video goes up, I think, is when it is expected that that will make it into the monthly version of GameMaker, and it's a pretty interesting system, and I'm going to talk about that today. So, assuming that you're running a reasonably new version of GameMaker, February 2023 or later, once again, you should be able to go into your asset browser, right-click, and create a new particle system. This is a new asset type that's been added to the IDE, and that will open up this particle editor. As particle editors go, it's pretty straightforward. It's rather nice looking if you've ever messed around with an external particle editor for GameMaker, such as the Particle Designer, which has been around forever, or the one that I made a few years ago, or if you've messed around with particle editors for other game engines. I believe Unity has one. You probably won't take that long to figure out how to use this thing. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time in here messing around. You can go mess with the properties, you can go mess with the sprites that you emit as particles, the color, the lifespan, the speed, velocity, friction, gravity, direction, that sort of thing. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time with this because this is the sort of thing that you all are going to have way more fun getting hands-on with, rather than just listening to me talk about it. So instead, I'm going to talk about some of the non-particle type things that you can do. For one, and I am going to go ahead and create myself a particle type that isn't just like some flavor of the default particles, because I want to have something that's a little bit more interesting this when I get around to messing with it in code. But to start with, we have a library, and there's actually a number of preset particle types that you can load into the engine. I actually have not messed around with all of these in depth on my own. This is going to be my first time seeing a lot of these as well. The last one that you saw was lightning. This one is embers, which is little tiny sparks that you might see coming off of a fire. Let's pick another one out, mostly random. This one is, I think that's that's smoke, but it's like fiery smoke. Fire like this is a bit of a tradition when it comes to creating and testing particle systems. Let's make that additive. I personally am a big fan of additive color blending when it comes to particles, possibly more than most people, but that's fire. And this comes from the library of built-in particle types that you can select as a preset, and you can use this as a starting point for anything that you might want to do on your own.
hey.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go and actually create myself my own particle of some type. Give me a minute while I just play around with this a little bit. I call this Explosion at the Crayola Factory. If you live anywhere in the vicinity of Easton, Pennsylvania, and you have not been there at least once when you were 5 years old, I feel sorry for you. Anyway, so this is my particle system. I won't dwell on it for too long. As far as custom particles go, just the same way that you had a bunch of preset particles that you can create, you can also save your own preset particles, which is fairly interesting. We can give this a name, so instead of calling this GM Smoke, which was just the name of the last preset that I loaded, I'm going to call this something like, oh, let's go with Crayola Factory Explosion. And now, if you were to go and create yourself another particle system, you can simply go and click on the Select Particles button, and you can click on Crayola Factory Explosion, and that will instantiate your particle system as a preset. And these are really prefab. They're linked to each other as the same particle system. You can unlink them like this, or you can let me bring that back and have it linked together. You can keep them linked. And if you were to change, for example, one attribute of one instance of this preset, for example, if we change one of those colors to blue, and if I go back to the original, you can. I really should name these better than just particle system 1 and 2. You can see that they're both the changes have been reflected in the first one from messing with it in the second one. I'm going to change it back to cyan, magenta, and yellow. let's see. I believe your alpha was a little bit lower than that. That's good. All right. So let me, I'm going to call this PS. It sounds a little violent, but I like to think that this is an explosion of, like, I don't know, crayons instead of, like, an explosion of, like, you know, natural gas or whatever. All right. Where were we? Was there anything else that I wanted to talk about in the particle editor itself that I did not yet get to? Down here at the bottom, the subparticles, this is something that you can do with GameMaker particles. You can have particles spawn additional particles when they're like every frame of the game, or you can have particles spawn additional particles when they expire, when they're cleared from the game. And standard warning applies to those. Be careful with those. It is very easy to cause a runaway chain reaction and have like infinitely many particles spawning and your game slowing down and crashing. If you do that, I know that some people think it's funny to do that at least once, but don't say I didn't warn you. Up here, so there's some properties related to the particle emitter and particle system itself, and all right, this is the one for the particle system. I'll talk about this first. This mostly relates to how it is drawn in the editor. Not much of this has any really meaningful bearing on like how it's going to look in the game. We can select the canvas size, so you see the light gray rectangle around the particle system here to sort of give you a vague impression of like what the screen is going to look like. You can't use a GameMaker room as a backdrop for a particle system, for better or for worse, but you can load in an image from your computer. I am going to find myself a nice image on my computer that I can put in as the background for this. What backdrop image did I select? Well, first I moved the particle emitter somewhat off the center of the canvas just to make it easier to see. But when I check the backdrop image button, we see that we have a picture of one of my chickens fighting with my dog. The chicken started it. This is a very old picture. Unfortunately, neither of these creatures are still alive. These were from like 2007. But you can set a picture in the background of your particle system editor over here. None of this will be like this. Isn't going to be included in the actual game when you build your game. This is just here so that you can possibly have something to use as like a reference when you create your particle system. Moving on to the emitter settings. This is once again, if you're familiar with how GameMaker particles work, you're probably familiar with the the properties of the emitter. There's a couple things that relate to like how the emitter is drawn in the editor, such as like the preview area of this. You can't even see it underneath the particles that are spewing out. But the backdrop area of the emitter. Oh, come on, really? One of the like complaints that I have about how the particle system editor is done so far is that it is really kind of unnecessarily difficult to grab the grab handles on the All right, now that it's a little bigger, that makes it easier. It is sometimes unnecessarily difficult to grab the grab handles on things such as the emitters or that kind of thing. Hopefully your games makes that a little bit easier to do in the future. You can set the is the preview color really not drawing? Oh, that's the line. Because the distribution of the or the shape rather of the emitter is it can be either a rectangle, an ellipse, which is a circle thing, a diamond, or a line, and it was set to line. Let's set that to rectangle, and we can have the explosion go off again continuously. So the particle count, distribution, shape, and position of the emitter does have bearing of how this is going to be drawn in the actual game. This is where your particle system is going to be drawn in the actual room when you instantiate one. I'll get to that in a minute. First, let's see. This is the emitter itself. You can have multiple emitters in a particle system. You can hide them. You can show them. They are layer dependent I think I'm just going to go with the Crayola Factory Explosion particle type now. And you can see that the emitter type is linked to the particle type, which is one of the presets that I created, because there's the chain over there. All right. Where am I and where am I going? So I think it's time, now that we've... By the way, I should mention, I don't know if I made this clear earlier, but particle emitters and particle types... types are tied to emitters in the particle editor in the IDE. This isn't necessarily the case in particle-like types in GameMaker that you can create through code. You can have one particle type that works with multiple emitters, but as a general rule, the particle editor in the IDE is designed assuming that you will have one type per emitter. And you can, of course, clone types and emitters fairly easily with the prefab preset feature, but just don't get thrown off by that. Let me see. I can delete that secondary particle system there, because I'm only going to be using the one. So when it comes to putting these in a room, there's currently two ways that you can do it. One is to create an asset layer, whereas just like a generic asset layer like this. You can create an asset layer in your GameMaker room, and you can drag your particle system onto it, and for whatever reason, it won't preview in the room editor, and I'm not sure why. I thought it did, but apparently it does not. And when you run the game, and we're gonna be launching an Opera GX. All right, hang on. So when I set the target to Windows and run the game, every time I like update the beta or like sign out of the beta, it likes to do that, and it's a little annoying. Yeah, Opera, go away. Don't need you eating up computer resources right now. All right, let's try that again. Let's run the game. And you can see where I created the particle system in the room, we have an explosion. And this is centered around the location of that like particle icon in the room. The origin of the particle system, even though the rectangle that's drawn in the preview editor and the background image is drawn like with the system in the center, at least by default. I think you can move that around, can't you? If you like set the system's offset to... All right, never mind. The particle system is drawn centered at the location of that particle icon. So that's just something to keep in mind when positioning this. If I were to offset this a little bit, this emitter to the side, to the side and down, of course, that same offset would be applied. Oh, you can see the... Come on, let me move you. You can see the bounds of the emitter too in the system. I didn't realize that's what that rectangle was, but we now have the particle system living there instead. I should probably like move that back to the sort of center just to keep myself from getting confused. All right. If you don't want to have a particle system live on an asset layer like that, you can, of course, go and create yourself an instance. And the amount of messing with particle assets through code that you can do, at least at the current moment, is somewhat limited. So we have the old function part system create. And this might be a little bit counterintuitive. I know a lot of people tried doing other things with the particle system assets that didn't really work when these first came out, but if you say part system create, let's save that to an instance variable called part system. Previously, this function would have taken no arguments, but now it takes one optional argument, and it will take the optional argument of the particle system. So the name of the particle system that we created. So in my case, that's ps_Crayola explosion, and this will allow you to instantiate a particle system through code. With the like taking as a template the particle system that you created in the IDE. So now I'm going to want to drag. No, I said. Well, I guess that would have done it. Let's go and drag an instance of object 1 into the room, and when I run the game in the create event, we are going to create a particle system. And did I really like move the origin of? I moved something. Oh, you know what? The particle system, when you do that, is drawn relative to the room origin and not the position of the object. So it doesn't matter where the object is in the room when I create a particle system through code. The particle system that emerges is always going to be relative to the room origin, unlike when you create an asset layer. All right. Glad we got that straightened out. So from here, you can do a lot of the same things that you can do with particle systems through code. We have part system automatic automatic draw. We have part system automatic update. And you can use that if you want to control when a particle system is drawn or have its step event processed on your own. I'm not going to get too into the things that you can do with particle systems through code, but if you've messed around with particles in GameMaker in the past at any point, you're probably familiar with most of these. Accessing the emitters that are created through code is something that's not, at least at the moment, as far as I know, there isn't really a good way to do it. And if there is, that I have not yet found, definitely let me know in the comments of this video. I'll pin your comment and make sure that people see it. But there isn't really a good way to change the particle types or particle emitters that that come with one of these particle systems. If I wanted to, for example, have the particle system move around with a mouse cursor, we could say part emitter region, and this would be a function that would allow you to set the region of a particle emitter. So my system is going to be self.part system. The emitter is not available through any like emitter variable that we have access to. If you try to say like PS Crayola explosion, this will work by coincidence if the index of the particle system happens to be the same as an emitter, but that is not something that you should be doing. If you were to say something like take the preset name of the particle type and try to use that, it won't work. You'll see that in a minute. It would be somewhat nice if there was a way to do something like this, but as discussed, it does not. So if I were to say the xmin is going to be something like mouse x minus like 20, x max mouse y plus mouse x plus 20, mouse y minus 20, mouse y plus 20, shape ps shape, rectangle distribution ps distribution linear. The argument order for the region of a particle system is really weird. It's x min, x max, y min, y max, instead of x min, y min, x max, y max, like pretty much everything else. This will not work. This will crash the game because GameMaker, the runtime does not know what Crayola Factory Explosion is. That is only something that exists in the IDE. You can always hard code the particle index, so knowing that this particle system only has one emitter, you can always hard code the particle emitter index, but that's really not a great idea either. And you can see that now the emitter follows the mouse cursor around. That does admittedly look rather cool, but for the most part, particle systems that you create through the IDE are really intended to be a little bit on the fire and forget side. This is supposed to be something that you what's the word I'm looking for? This is supposed to be something that you create and have like fire particles, for example, being drawn in place of like a campfire, and that's not going to move around the world or anything like that, or something like rain or fog or that sort of thing. But that is going to do it for now, I think. I guess I'll actually like leave the end of the video on the Crayola Factory Explosion following my mouse cursor around, because this does look rather cool. I just don't ask me why I decided to do this, but I like how it looks. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. There really wasn't a lot of code in this example, and once again, I think a lot of you would have a lot more fun playing around with the particle editor yourself than you would from just like downloading my pigmentation explosion example off the internet, so I'm not going to put this one on GitHub. I do try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one tutorial like this. I like to cover the weirder things you can do in GameMaker, such as 3D things, and one Let's Make a Game, which is currently a 3D wizard game, so if any of that appeals to you, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. Otherwise, I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Army Armbuster, DJ Gibbles, Edward Holt, GameMaker, Gamer Player, Harold Guidry, Manta Ray, Rowdy Coder, Syndra Larson, Squarecrow, Vitro V, and Zenjiment for supporting these videos. If you want to contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.